encouraging. But the great news is that we now finally have the first South African town, the executive mayor who sits over 6 other mayors in the local area, with the entire council that received my presentation, and a 45-minute lecture turned into a 3.5-hour lecture and discussion about the One Small Town initiative, after which the idea was embraced and fully accepted by every single member of the council, especially driven by the mayor in that area. So this is extremely exciting. And I guess it's going to change everything into the future, what I'm involved in, what I'm doing. A lot of my effort and energy is going to be going into getting this first town in South Africa off to a very successful start over the next 4 to 6 months. So I just wanted to share that with you. And this is why we had to cancel last week's event, because I was out in the middle of South Africa in the Karoo, in the Kalahari, meeting with the mayor and the council and doing all those presentations to them. All right, but here we are. Hello, welcome to everybody. Thanks for saying hi. It's great to see you here. And so here we are, the 4th out of 6 lectures that we've agreed to do here online. And this week, I'm very excited to carry on where we left off last week. So let me share my screen, but before I do that, I'm just first going to make sure that, no, that's not where I'm going. I just want to make sure I'm in the right place in this presentation. I was just working on it before I joined you. And all right, here we are. So let me share my screen with you. Okay, can you see that, Neil? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we see it, brother.
All right, come on. Let's go from current slide. All right, good. Now it's going to be as much a surprise for me as for you as we go through these slides that I prepared for myself to help stimulate the conversation and the subject topic. But before we start, what we're going to try and get through is what I've listed here in the PR, and as you may have seen. But before we start, let me take you. I need to make this smaller. It keeps getting in my way here. Right. Let's move to some toroidal measurements. I may have shared with you in some of the previous lectures that we've done online. I can't remember now whether I did or not. Some of the biggest news, possibly in geology and mineralogy and chemical engineering and so forth, in the last 100 years or so, one of the biggest breakthrough research and discoveries has been the discovery of quasicrystals right here, not far from me. And they were discovered by my partner, Martin, in the Antiquities Research Institute that we set up some 3 years ago. And we haven't really publicized this. We put out a low-level press release here in South Africa. That was received very mildly. I don't think people realize what a big deal this is, this discovery of these quasicrystals. You know, the guy that first discovered the quasicrystals won a Nobel Prize for his discovery. Since their discovery in Russia, then after the theoretical sort of thought, presentation of quasicrystals, and then the discovery in Russia of these tiny little quasicrystals in the early 80s. The quasicrystals that were then discovered and shipped off to be analyzed and researched mysteriously vanished and disappeared, and they have never resurfaced again. So as far as I know, there are no existing naturally discovered or found quasicrystals. There are many synthetically created ones that they create because they're extremely highly valuable in very high level, I guess, military and industrial military complex research and advanced weaponry and so forth. So the fact that we've got quasicrystals that we discovered here, and we literally have thousands of them that are the size of match heads and even bigger, is just an unbelievable discovery. So when we officially launch the Antiquities Research Institute with my partner Martin in the next few weeks, which will be supported by the local premier of Mpumalanga province, some national ambassadors, some national ministers from central government in South Africa, in tourism, and in business, economic development, and so forth. We will then start doing the publicity and the PR on all the additional discoveries that we haven't necessarily made public. So I just wanted to remind you of this, that about the fact that there is such incredible research and discovery being made every week, all the time, while I'm still dealing with one small town. So I'm stretched to an extent that I never ever imagined could be possible. I'm doing the best I can to juggle all these balls because I believe they're all equally important. However, my heart and mind right now believes that the One Small Town initiative is probably the most important thing for all of humanity, because once we launch the first One Small Town, it'll create the platform for all research and discovery, scientific breakthroughs, medical breakthroughs, energy breakthroughs. It'll make all that far more possible than it is today under the One Small Town, on the One Small Town platform, within the One Small Town environment where discovery, invention, creation is inspired and invited by the mayor and the community. So all of this is inextricably connected. And this is why it's so exciting to be involved in all of these activities. So before we start today, I want to just bring you back to some toroidal measurements, which I'm not sure if I shared these with you in some of the previous presentations that we've done online. But let me just play this for you. Remember that we now know exactly how the torus stones work. We understand the mechanism behind the torus stones. And I also wanted to share a little video with you that my partner Martin shot, but because I didn't ask his permission to share it, I decided not to share it in this lecture with you, but I'll explain to you what he has discovered at the same time, just through a little simple experiment. We now know how the torus stones work. We understand the toroidal mechanisms. We understand the double toroidal vortex field as opposed to the single torus vortex field. There are very important differences between the two. Like you see these torus stones on this image, these are on display in my museum, and you can see how worn out and broken they are. And yet most of them, not all of them, but most of them still display powerful toroidal vortex energies. It is now very clear that it is the shape, that donut shape, that toroidal field shape, that generates the energies and that generates automatically and naturally generates the toroidal fields. Now, I don't have with me the torus stone that crashed the TSA system. I've shared that with you. You've seen it before. And we've recently done a video recording with Martin for my private channel. And if you haven't joined my private channel on Vimeo, please go to my website, michaeltellinger.com, and sign up for that channel. There are hundreds and hundreds of videos on that, and we can keep adding more videos. Plus, I'll be adding an extensive video library of 1,500 documentaries that I'll be adding there, rare and documentaries that are very difficult and hard to find, and just laying it out on a platter for everyone that joins that channel, so that it becomes a treasure trove of an archive of important knowledge, information, documentaries, plus obviously all the research that I do here and constantly updating that. So what I was doing this video with Martin for that video channel, and we were showing the Taurus stones, the Taurus stone that crashed the TSA security system. And we are playing around with this little tool. You see this little tool that I hold in my hand? Let me take it further away. It's a little device that is used underwater by divers. And let me bring it a bit closer so you can see. And this is the sensitive part. This is that measures either metal. So it detects metallic objects. It detects magnetic fields and electromagnetic fields, right? So that's what this device does. It's incredibly sensitive. And we were measuring and playing around with a Taurus stone that crashed the TSA system. And then and showing how it gives off energy and so forth. And we showed other Taurus stones that when you put this device into the Taurus stone, into the center, it just goes crazy. It gives you nothing from the side. So when you bring this from the side and you touch the Taurus, imagine this is the Taurus. When you touch it from the side, nothing. It gives you absolutely nothing. But the moment you bring this into the center of the Taurus, like over there, thank you, Lemon, for being a lovely prop. I'm going to come back to this Lemon a little bit later. The moment you bring this device into the center of the Taurus, into the whole of one of these Taurus stones, it goes crazy. So it shows you, it picks up and detects electromagnetic fields and magnetic fields generated by the Taurus stones. But what we discovered at that stage was that when I took one of the replicas, I had about 11 or 12 replicas of that Taurus stone made. It looks identical. In fact, you can't tell the difference when you see them lying there. When I went to fetch these Taurus stones from the artist that made them out near Krugersdorp in South Africa, I walked into her beautiful big studio where she does beautiful sculptures and statues, and she's an incredible artist. And I saw these Taurus stones lying there. I looked at them and I went, whoa, which one is the original? Which is the original one? I couldn't tell the difference. So she laughed and she was very pleased with her efforts. So to come back to the story is when we took these replica Taurus stones and I brought this again from the side, bring it to the side of the Taurus, nothing happens. The moment you bring it from the top into the whole of the Taurus, it goes crazy and starts to pick up magnetic and electromagnetic fields. So it very clearly tells us that it is not necessarily just the original stones that were made from specific stone materials and granites and Hornfels rock, but any kind of donut shape, Taurus shape that generates that kind of energy. Now, to prove that to you and to show you how that works is I'm going to use this little spring thing that, this little toy that many of you would have seen. You collapse it. It's this little circle of wires, right? And then you literally just say, okay, the Spirit of God moved over the waters and God said, let there be light. And boom, you've got a beautiful toroidal field that manifests. And so what I've just shared with you there, by the way, is a crash course in quantum mechanics and manifestation and the generation manifestation of physical form out of consciousness and the combination of water and consciousness, which seems to be the combination that is necessary for manifestation of physical form. As you may recall in last week's lecture, we spoke about stars and everything that comes out of water. But I'll come back to that for a little while. So just to show you how even this toroidal field that is created by these thin little wires generates a powerful energetic field out of the center, not from the side. I hope you can see me through this. Wow, the energy is really strong. All right, so let me take this little machine, this little device. Let me turn it on. Okay, now just to show you that it picks up metal, here's my little cell phone, stand. You can see I'll bring it. You can see the little beeping speeds up. All right, so it picks up metal. I mean, my phone, that will pick up my phone. Yeah, it picks up the electromagnetic fields in the phone. All right, let's take a lemon. Nothing with a lemon. That would have been spectacular if it did pick up some toroidal field from the top of the lemon. I did not expect that. I'm just thinking, wow, what happens? But it doesn't. See, the lemon has got nothing magnetic. It doesn't generate electromagnetic fields strong enough to pick up with its device. It will generate very, very, very low level electromagnetic fields like everything else and magnetic fields. But let's have a look at this device here. So what's important to note is that this, I'm just going to bring it. This is the metal. I'm just touching the metal. Just to show you that there is, it's a weird thing. Sometimes it picks up the metal and sometimes it doesn't. Like now I'm touching it and it doesn't pick up the metal. Generally speaking, it does not pick up the metallic properties in this little torus coil, this wire coil. It's now not picking up. I'm touching it, it's not picking up the metal. So whatever metal is used to make this wire has very low metallic property, whatever, I don't even know what to call it, but it does not pick it up. Oops, I can't even put it down on the desk. It starts to beep, picks up some metal in the nails or the screws that are holding my desk together. So now I've collapsed this little thing, right? And I'm gonna bring it just to the side of it. You can see it does not react to the metal. There's a lot of metal there, and yet it doesn't react until you get really, really close, right? But look what happens when you turn it sideways. So when I turn it sideways, look what happens. Look how far I am. Can you see the power, even this collapsed toroidal field? What we've done here, this is the toroidal field that's being collapsed. You saw me bring this closer to the side of this, and you've got to get really close to the metal for it to pick up the metal. And yet from the side, it's almost a foot away. It picks up the flattened toroidal field. How do we know that this is the case? I can't put this down because it picks up metal in everything. Look at this. So you can see, let me remind you again, from the side, nothing. I'm touching that metal. You can see I'm actually touching it. And it's not picking up the metal. And yet, when I come from the top, look at that. I'm about 5 centimeters, 6 centimeters, almost 10 centimeters above it. Well, about 6, 7 centimeters. And it starts to pick up the toroidal field. This is spectacular. So this just goes to prove again that, let me turn that off. Just goes to prove again that it is the toroidal shape that generates the magnetic and the electromagnetic fields. This is truly spectacular, and so much more that we have discovered. And just to remind you, let me collapse this. Just to remind you, all right, just to remind you, I'm going to play this video for you, just to remind you how even on a cell phone, on a Tesla meter, that EMF meter that measures in microtesla, it shows you how the torus stones emit and generate toroidal fields. And it's during this was the first time that we actually ever saw on an electronic device how the torus stone either pushes energy in the one direction or sucks energy in the opposite direction. So enjoy.
Your screen is not sharing right now. Michael, you need to share your screen.
Oh, I did not share my screen. Okay. Let's start again.
And make sure you click share computer sound or share sound.
Yes. That's why this thing collapsed very strangely, because I wasn't sharing my screen. Thank you very much. All right, now this one is going to show you how it both pushes and pulls energy. Another example, how the torus stones emit electromagnetic fields and powerful magnetic fields. Here is another torus stone that maxes out our measuring device in microtesla. Watch that needle on the cell phone. Thank you. And now we demonstrate how the torus stones do push energy two ways. They push energy and they suck energy. And this is a very important discovery. This particular torus stone, in the way that it's lying, sucks energy. You can see the needle going in the opposite direction, into the negative, as opposed to spiking and increasing. If you remove it, Chris, and let's see how the needle rises again. Just move right away from it to show. There you go. So that's the normal reading in the room. And let's go back. Beautiful. Torus stones both suck energy and push energy. Okay, another example. So before we carry on, I trust you'll recall from some of the previous workshops that we did the images of the thermal imaging camera that shows the energy going the one way, the blue on the one side, you turn it around and suddenly it's red. So we now know exactly the function of these torus stones. So let's move on. I just wanted to show you this exciting device and the many unexpected discoveries we've made. I tell you, in fact, while I'm on this little device, what blew my mind, and this is what I'll probably be filming in not this coming week, the next week. I'll be spending 5 days in the field making many more videos for my video channel. So like I said, if you're not signed up yet, please go and sign up, because we upload 20-minute or 2 20-minute episodes every week at this stage. What we did when we were at Adam's Calendar recently, well, some time ago now, because months are flying by, is Martin brought this again. He found this by accident, this device. And when you approach Adam's Calendar, at some point, when you put this on the ground, it picks up electromagnetic and magnetic fields. It starts to beep. And that's just a mind-blowing discovery. When you go right between the Adam's Calendar stones in the center of it, and you put it down, even like 10 centimeters before it actually hits the ground, it already starts to beep. So this very clearly tells us that there's not metal in the ground, because there's no metal in the ground, it's just soil. There are all these rocks lying around, and yet this device starts to beep, telling us that there's magnetic and electromagnetic fields. We know this, I know this, I've shared this for more than 10 years now, nearly 12 years, that there are electromagnetic fields and sound frequencies being emitted by Adam's Calendar and the stone circles. What is fascinating, though, is that it does that to a large radius away from Adam's Calendar. So one of the experiments we're going to do in the next documentary that I'll be shooting is to go to Adam's Calendar, start at the center, show how it beeps before you even hit the ground. And by the way, there are 2 electromagnetic fields running at Adam's Calendar. One is above the ground, running clockwise, and the other one is just below the surface of the ground that seems to be running in the opposite direction, but clockwise from the bottom side of the torus. So that the soil, the ground surface at Adam's calendar would be the equator. All right, it would be the equator, the toroidal equator, the physical form, that the accretion disk, and then the toroidal field would run clockwise on top and clockwise from the bottom. And that creates the torsion fields that meet at the event horizon, or not the event horizon, at the accretion disk. So what we're going to do is we're going to start at the center and move away from Adam's calendar to determine how far away does that site affect and give off electromagnetic fields. Now, I'm very excited to go and do that, film it in a little documentary and share that with everybody. This was a very long introduction for today's online workshop, but it's all connected and it's all part of what we're talking about here, because nothing is separate. Remember that nature does not compartmentalize things into subjects like our school and education systems do, leaving us lobotomized and confused about how everything is connected. And that's part of the problem that I'm trying to solve. And part of the problem, some of the problems that we're trying to overcome with these online lectures, these workshops, and the work that I do in general in discovering these amazing gifts that we've been given, the knowledge and information that we've been given. So just to recap what we did last month, is that it's now very clear that water is everywhere in space. There's water on the moon and large amounts of water, huge amounts of water actually. There's water on Mars, huge amounts of water. There's water on meteors. There's water in supercluster galaxies that are spewing out water, and so on and so on and so on. All stars have water. This is really important for people to come to terms with, that all stars have water. And the reason, because stars were originally formed out of water. Solar systems are formed out of water and silica quartz crystals. And again, NASA and the European Space Agency and all the agencies keep telling us this information in various articles, but we don't pay attention to what they tell us. We don't read between the lines of what that actually means. Then the important thing that we covered was sonoluminescence. What is sonoluminescence? And that's when you put sound into a body of water. And sonoluminescence seems to create two kinds of effects. And this is quite a new realization that I've made, a new discovery that I've made, is that one of them is known as the star in a jar. When you take a body of water and there's a little bubble inside, and then you bring a certain frequency to the surface of the jar of a spherical jar of water. And after a certain while, that little bubble lights up with a brilliant light, and fills it with light. The other form of sonoluminescence is when there is no bubble of light, and you bring a sound frequency to the surface of the water. And after a little while, that entire body of water starts to get filled with something that looks like this. It looks just like the image of deep space of the universe. And that starts to ring some very strong connecting bells and make us wonder about what the universe really is. Since our bodies are made up of water, every one of our cells is made up of water, and it is now very clear. Now I'm going off the track here a little bit, but it's really important just to bring it up. So it allows you to just think even broader and wider about how all these things are connected. It is now very clear that what we've been taught in biology, in molecular biology and cell biology and botany and so forth, that is not necessarily true. Human cells and animal cells, plant cells are not made up of the components that we've been taught at school, medical school. Now, if you've studied biology, you'll know about the human cell and what they tell us inside. However, many experts, researchers, and PhD graduates and Nobel Prize winners have shared over the last 50, 60, 70 years, have already shared with us that the cell content is not what we are told by mainstream education. That's huge. That's a huge breakthrough, because just like we now know that atoms do not look the way that we've been told, that there is not a nucleus, this infinitely dense nucleus at the center of an atom, that atoms are actually toroidal fields. and that infinite density inside of an atom, just like anything else of a toroidal field, is that infinite density of the 0 point. This is really important. So it looks like we've been lied to on every possible level, from biology to science to history to religion. Everything. Physics obviously becomes a very interesting subject to understand how physics can be used to confuse us, how mathematics can be used to confuse us, how mathematics is the tool of magicians, literally. With mathematics, you can try and prove anything. And if you know how to manipulate mathematics, you will prove everything and anything that you want to prove. So what's important to identify is that everything is made up of water. It seems that water is the fundamental structure of everything in creation. And this is why I find that first phrase of the Bible so really, really fascinating. The Spirit of God moved over the waters, and God said, "Let there be light." This just shows us how much advanced knowledge is encoded into the scriptures of the Bible and other ancient writings. But in the Bible, it is beautifully put together for us to read between the lines and really learn so much when we know what to eliminate as the soap opera and the surface clutter, and get to the nitty-gritty of the real knowledge. So is it possible that space is an infinite body of water? And I must tell you that I'm beginning to believe that more and more. It just somehow resonates with me. Since our bodies are made up of water and everything comes out of water, and then through the water in our bodies, we get this physical exterior that looks solid and feels physical and solid. And even when you look at wood, for example, you know that wood can't burn unless it has a certain content of water. When wood is completely dry, this is a fascinating thing that I learned many years ago now in a documentary about water, is that when a wood is completely and utterly dry, it will not burn. So this water thing is just becoming more and more important for us to embrace. So let's continue here. So we also covered how Earth's water can possibly be older than the sun, like in this article. You know, it tells us that Earth's water is older than the sun. So once again, if we go back to the Bible and we follow the sequence of events, you know, God said, "Let there be light." The Spirit of God moved over the waters. So there's water everywhere. Somehow there's water everywhere. And then God said, the consciousness of creation, the consciousness of the Creator, the frequencies of the consciousness of conscious thought created a vibration and a frequency. And God said, "Let there be light." And those vibrations and frequencies then created electromagnetic fields that turned into light. So out of sound and resonance comes light. And out of that light is created the earth. So how can the earth have water older than the sun? Well, because the Bible tells us that the earth was formed before the sun in the sky and the lights in the sky were created. So if you know how to read between the clutter, we can get a lot of knowledge and information out of the Bible and even the 7 days of creation. It's really fascinating stuff to sink into. Just get rid of all the clutter of preconceived ideas, have a complete open mind to be able to absorb any kind of information, as alien as it may seem or feel, or as much as you want to fight it with every ounce of blood in your body because it just, you know, everything you've been told is wrong. Just let it sink in, let it wash over you. And you'll find how maybe what you're fighting today, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years from now, or a week from now, or a day from now, will suddenly feel far more natural and more obvious to you than what we thought we knew was the truth. So let's talk about space and the vacuum of space, which is a huge, huge subject. So on the one hand, we are told by NASA and our so-called very clever people out there that occupy very high positions and get paid millions of dollars to occupy these positions. We're told, we're constantly given conflicting information. And as I mentioned before, if the government is lying to us through the news channels, through the media, through the movies, through science, through education, through the medical industries, through, curing for disease. They're hiding knowledge, hiding information. Why would anybody believe that NASA was created to tell us the truth? And as I mentioned before, it is becoming more and more resonant with me that NASA may actually be the largest disinformation agency that has ever been set up by our governments, or the global elite set up these few major agencies like NASA around the world to determine what lies they will tell us and what they'll feed through to us to keep us confused and keep us in the dark about who we are, where we come from, why we're here, and what space really is, what the universe really is, and our role in this incredible infinite place called the universe. So on the one hand, they tell us that there's water everywhere, right? We went through that last month. There's water everywhere in space. Literally everywhere you look, there's bloody water. Giant supercluster galaxies that are shooting bullets of water into space. Now just imagine that, how big that bullet of water will be that's coming out of a supercluster galaxy. It's an insane size, right? Compared to our Earth and our sun and our solar system. We're talking about a supercluster galaxy, not one galaxy. We're talking about a galaxy that consists of billions of galaxies. That giant thing that is structured into a toroidal field that looks just like a giant eye or another torus, right, is shooting out giant bullets of water. So just imagine the size of these bullets of water. So what is NASA and these space agencies trying to tell us? So is there a vacuum in space? How is that possible? There to be a vacuum and then yet everything is filled with water. I really struggle with this. I cannot find a comfortable area where the two can meet and live happily side by side. And the reason I say this is because this vacuum of space is just insane. So, for example, atmospheric pressure at sea level on Earth is about 101,000 pascals. So when you go about 100 meters or something above sea level, or 111 meters above sea level, that's when you get to 100,000 pascals, right? And because vacuum is measured in pascals, so if the pressure on Earth at sea level is 101,000 pascals, and then the further you go away, the pressure gets less and less and less. And at one stage, our atmosphere ends. And we enter the vacuum of space, as they call it. Well, what is the vacuum, the value of the vacuum in space? This is what Wikipedia tells us, right? That outer space is outer space is about between 1 to the 10 to the -4 pascals up to -15 pascals. So it's 10 or 3 times 10 with 15 zeros behind it. That's the negative pressure of outer space. Compare that to the 100,000 pascals at sea level. So just what I'm trying to say here is that space sucks, right? It's an expression that we've used. Space sucks. Vacuum sucks. The vacuum of space is so strong that no amount of gravity would be able to keep the Earth's atmosphere on Earth connected to the Earth through the weakest of the 4 forces that we know, right? Which is gravity. The one force, one of the 4 main forces that we get taught in physics, gravity is the one that is least understood, least defined. We know very little about gravity. We don't quite understand. Mainstream physics and astronomers and physicists refuse to answer questions about gravity because it is a trap. It's a trap. they get into trouble the moment they try and answer those questions. So they try and avoid it, or they just say, we simply don't know. And yet gravity remains the fundamental force that apparently keeps us all on Earth and keeps atmosphere here. Is our gravity keeps it here. And yet it's the weakest of all the forces. So some of you might argue that, well, the weak force, which is the nuclear force, is weaker. That's not necessarily the case, because we know how the weak force affects us. So what is going on here? Why are they lying to us? And who's lying to us? Is it possible for vacuum, for space to be a vacuum at this that sucks so much, and yet our little fragile ball in the sky has an atmosphere that's held together by this thing called gravity? So we need to determine what gravity is. And so what I'm trying to say is that basic physics does not allow space to be a vacuum. And the question we need to ask ourselves is, where does the vacuum begin? And where is that defining line? Because it can't just fizzle out into nothingness and then suddenly there's this infinite vacuum. There needs to be a defining line somewhere, because that's where we also meet the gravity. That's somewhere between gravity and the vacuum of space. There needs to be a defining line, and just as far as basic physics goes, in an absolute vacuum, there's some things that you can't do, certain things that can't happen in a vacuum that's devoid of everything. And this is where you start seeing the fancy foot dance that NASA and the space agencies do. So once again, on the one hand, they're telling us that there's water everywhere in space, and everything comes from water, even the stars and the planets, and everything comes from water and out of water first. And then they tell us that space is a vacuum, and that the vacuum of space is 3 times 10 to the minus of to the negative power of 15, which is an incredibly powerful sucking energy, and somewhere in this we all fit into it. So, and then they tell us, then they realize, hold on, but no, vacuum can't be empty because there's other stuff in there. So then they tell us that vacuum is not completely empty, that there are actually particles and atoms in vacuum, but they so far removed that we can actually call it, that it's called the space empty. Like that there's one particle per, one atom per cubic meter of space, or something ridiculous like that. So they keep fudging the science and fudging the information, and this is what they keep telling us. So there's no real clarity on this. They keep shifting the goalposts. So just when you're in an absolute vacuum, these are some of the things that can't happen, right? Because it just can't. Sound, for example, sound can't travel in vacuum. So when you see images of the moon landing and the guys on the moon knocking a peg into the lunar surface, and there's no atmosphere on the moon, and yet we hear the sound. We hear the sound of the hammer knocking the peg into the lunar surface. There's a big problem with that, right? So just reminding you about the moon landing. We're going to come back to that in a moment. There's a big problem with all of this stuff. Then we get to explosions in space. We see movies. We see science fiction movies all the time that show us explosions and fire and propulsions and jet engines and rockets in space. All of these things cannot happen in a vacuum. In an absolute vacuum, it cannot happen. And I defy any physicist that wants to tell me that even if that it can happen, because this vacuum is not completely empty, because there's one atom per cubic meter of space, and therefore explosions and fire and propulsions can happen. It's just such fancy foot dance work and lies to cover up other lies that we need to start reaching certain conclusions. And those conclusions are that NASA is there to lie to us, to do all kinds of experiments in space that they do not tell us about. And they keep selling us a fairy tale of what it is that they're doing, what space is, what space looks like. And they sell that fairy tale to us through Hollywood and through the science fiction movies that they've been shoving down our throats for well, nearly 100 years now, especially the last 50, 60, 70 years with science fiction movies that started to come out since the 50s, and Space Odyssey and Star Wars and Star Trek and all these. And we have these images imprinted in our minds, and we believe that this is what space looks like. Now, can you imagine when we can look at movies like Gravity? I think Gravity is one of the great examples of how they can simulate space. If they can simulate that for a Hollywood movie to make it look like space, it looks like footage that NASA shows us. If a Hollywood movie can simulate space the way that NASA shows us images from space, which one is real and which one is fake? And unfortunately, NASA cannot be trusted. And what they tell us about space and what Hollywood is telling us about space may be, and I'm beginning to side, well, not beginning to, I have for some time moved very close to believing that everything that NASA has shown us about space, what space looks like, what planets look like, what it's, what Earth looks like from space, and all those things is actually a lie. And that's a departure. That's a point that needs to be discussed in a lot more detail. Now this brings us to one of the biggest lies. And I think if you've been following the sort of social media lately, and I think it may have even reached some of the low-level mainstream media channels about the fact that the moon landings were staged, it was all fake. I think more and more people are coming to terms with this. It was a big competition between the USA and Russia in the 60s. It was all about the atomic race, the nuclear race, the whole nuclear stand down, the what's it called, the Cold War, and the Cuban standoff, and all that horrible time in the 60s. That's all just shenanigans, just controlled by the global elite, and using the media as the propaganda tool. We know all about that today, much more than we did know about it in the 60s. In the 60s, we were a lot more naive. We'd believe anything that was shown on TV in those days. And this is why it's so difficult to let go of many of those things from the 60s and the 50s that we grew up with, those that are old enough to remember the moon landing. I remember it well. I was 9 years old. I watched it and I was just so impressed. And to let go of that is difficult. It's not easy. So by now, everybody should realize that the original moon landings, I'm not saying that all moon landings were faked, but I'm saying that the original moon landings were faked and were most likely shot by Stanley Kubrick. And Jay Widener's Kubrick Odyssey is one of the best documentaries that actually shows this. And please do yourself a favor, find this documentary called Kubrick Odyssey by Jay Widener. It is actually on Gaia. I just saw it recently. They do feature it on Gaia because Jay Widener is a producer on Gaia. I'm not sure if he's still there, but Jay is actually the guy that shot my series that is featured on Gaia TV. So I got to know Jay very well. We had many discussions about the moon landings, Stanley Kubrick, and all those things. So I got a bit more background knowledge to the moon landings and the Kubrick Odyssey documentary and so forth. So watch this, and you'll never ever believe that the original moon landing footage that we've seen was real, and you'll start to understand that it was Stanley Kubrick that shot it. Then he made the movie called The Shining, in which he very clearly gives us clues. Because you can imagine Stanley Kubrick couldn't come out and tell the world that he did this. And eventually when he did, many years later, when he did try to expose the elite, the same elite that pulled him in to fake or to shoot the fake moon landings, basically gave him a blank check to make whatever movies he wanted. That's what Jay Widener believes, that was the deal that Stanley Kubrick struck with the Hollywood elite. So he shot the moon landings, and after that, he could make all these movies he wanted, and that's why he made such very interesting movies. And then finally, he went a little too far when he shot Eyes Wide Shut. And the last time, apparently, Stanley Kubrick was seen was shouting at the top of his voice when he was running out of a meeting with the CEO or the head of Warner Brothers that released Eyes Wide Shut. And that was about 3 weeks before he died, or even closer to the time he died. And then shortly after that, his movie was released with a famous 20-minute missing edit that was edited out that so many people are talking about. 20 minutes. That's why when you watch Eyes Wide Shut, it doesn't make any sense. It ends very abruptly and without any context. So Stanley Kubrick, interesting guy, and the movies he made for sure. So the moon landings. The moon, what can we say about the moon? The only celestial body that does not spin. That's the first thing we can say about it, because it seems that every other celestial body that we see, the asteroids, the comets, everything seems to spin. All the moons of all the other planets that they keep showing us, everything seems to spin except our moon. Our moon keeps facing the Earth with the same side all the time. We never see another side of the moon. I know that there are guys that claim the moon does rotate because it rotates. It's just such nonsensical garbage. You know, imagine, I always, just think about this. We only ever see one side of the moon. So when we say the moon doesn't spin, that's what we refer to. Now, if you try and come up with some theoretical mumbo jumbo BS to try and explain why the moon spins so that we can only ever see the one side of the moon, then you've really been sucked into the deep vortex of the abyss of the disinformation. So the moon remains one of the most mysterious bodies right up here, right in our sky. And to some extent, I'm beginning to think that the moon is actually part of what I call the particle physics deception or the particle physics agenda. First of all, we got to ask ourselves, what is the moon, right? Well, first of all, there is a time that there was no moon in the sky. Many ancient civilizations talk about such a time in human history. And this is just mind-blowing. Theodorus says that the moon had appeared a little while before the war, which was fought by Hercules against the giants. Now, when you start studying the origins of the moon and a time before the moon appeared in the sky, you will be shocked. I just mentioned a few examples here. And there are many, many references in ancient texts about the world or the earth without the moon, before the moon appeared in the sky. So here just some, let me carry on reading this. Aristarchus and Dionysius, Chalcidensis, these names are often difficult to come off the tongue. So forgive me if I screw up the names. I've practiced them many, many times before, but somehow every time I have to read them live, I screw them up. So in the first of their works, confirms the same that there was no moon in the sky, that the moon had appeared a little while before the war, which was fought by Hercules against the giants. So these other guys also confirm the same, that there was a war by Hercules against the giants, and there was a time when the moon had appeared a little before that war. So did the appearance of the moon have something to do with the war of the giants against Hercules? Well, one would jump immediately to that conclusion. So another interesting twist to our reality and the possible world that we find ourselves in that we know so little about. Nicias said that the Arcadians were born before the moon, and so they were called the Proselenian, meaning before the moon. The Arcadians lived on Earth before there was a moon in the sky. And we talk about the Arcadians as if we know them from history books and from Greek history and so forth, right? So just keep these things in mind, how little we really know about everything. How little we know about the Second World War and who started the Second World War. I have to keep reminding people the Second World War wasn't started by Hitler. The Second World War was started by Churchill. And so many people are still not aware of that. So a moonless Earth. And if I threw a spanner among the works there, don't dwell on it. You can think about that later, right? The whole thing about the Second World War. There is just so much lies, so much deception. If you just look at what's happening in the Ukraine, Russia, USA today, just the lies and the deceptions that have been spun in mainstream media, it's just unbelievable. So it's crazy. So a moonless Earth continues. Plutarch, Hippolytus, Censorinus, and a doubting Lucian wrote of a pre-lunar people. Ovid said that the Arcadians possessed their land before the birth of Jove. Jove is referred to as Jupiter. Jupiter and Jove are the same, and were older than the moon. So the Arcadians possessed their land before Jupiter existed. What does that mean? Before the planet Jupiter was in the sky and before the moon appeared in the sky? This is some serious suggestions that we learn from Ovid. The Arcadians possessed their land before the birth of Jupiter, and they were older than the moon. And it carries on. Aristotle wrote that Arcadia in Greece, before being inhabited by the Hellenes, had a population of Pelasgians, and that these aborigines occupied the land already before there was a moon in the sky above the earth. And for this reason, they were called the Proselines, before the moon, those that lived on earth before the moon. So here are just some examples of the fact that earth has a history when there was no moon in the sky. Now, to most of us, that is an unimaginable thought, because we are taught how important the moon is to the creation of the tides in the ocean. And without the moon, there'd be no life on earth, that the oceans wouldn't rise and wouldn't wane. And therefore it would affect the earth completely, and there'd be no life on earth, and all this kind of nonsense. So just keep in mind that mainstream education and all the institutions, the research institutions around the world, are all funded by the same group of people. They're all funded by people that have huge amounts of money, that are either connected to the banking elite or directly funded by banks or institutions that are funded by the banks, the large pharmaceuticals, the large research institutions that are all funded by the bankers, and therefore they only ever release information that is part of their agenda. Nothing that'll undermine their control over our knowledge. Really critical. So whatever knowledge we get from textbooks in school or universities is very carefully and cunningly filtered. So no information is released and knowledge are released that'll undermine the big truth that will allow us to step out of the box and realize that we're being lied to. So it's up to us to recognize this control mechanism called education and research institutes, and recognize how controlled these places are and how incredibly powerful they are over how we think, how we behave, how we respond, how we communicate, how we argue, and how often our arguments are so nonsensical because we believe that we are right, and we're so far, what we're arguing about is so far from the truth that it's actually ridiculous. So let's carry on here. One of the big discoveries about the moon was made in 2012 by a guy that ran a YouTube channel, and now I have a complete block. I can't believe I have a complete block. I should have written it here and I didn't, because I remember it very well until the fluoride has clogged up my pineal gland and I can't think clearly. So that's a joke, right? I make jokes every now and then. I'll feed them into these lectures to keep it light and jovial. Jovial, wow, we just learned that Jove means Jupiter. So when we say jovial, does it mean that Jupiterian? We keep it Jupiterian. So any case, so Crow 777, that's his name. He goes by the name of Crow 777. I can't remember his real name. He had an amazing channel in which he discovered the lunar wave. Now, the lunar wave is a mind-blowing discovery. For those that have not seen this, I'm going to show you a short 3-minute video here of the lunar wave. And he first filmed this in 2012, and it shows you this. It's like a pressure wave or like a computer screen glitch wave. You know, when you see the early computer screens and TV screens, and when they correct or something, you see this line move across the screen, either up or down, this line, electronic line. And this is what this guy filmed on the moon. And we have to ask ourselves, what the hell is that? And he filmed it several times. And he found that the lunar waves seem to appear closer to the solstices and equinoxes. This is very important. That's when they were more frequent. And well, have a look. Let me play this for you and enjoy this.
All right, welcome to the Crow Discovery Project. Again, this is the 2012 lunar wave footage, the best example of the lunar wave that we have, and I'm going to show you some things that sharp-eyed followers have spotted long, long ago and that I have talked about, but I have never taken the time to carefully illustrate. And what I'm going to show you here means an awful lot, but I'm also going to show the pulses that happen in the lower left limb of the moon. So watch the lower left there, and I'm just going to run a straight slowed down view, 30%. If you've got sharp eyes, you'll see what we detected on a 60-inch monitor. Now look inside the circle. There's a pulse that goes from lower left to upper right, and in the next circle, the yellow one, there's a lateral sweep that goes from left to right straight across the screen. And this is all going on as the wave is starting at the bottom. So now look at the pulses backwards and forwards. That's backwards. This is forwards coming from the lower left limb of the moon. You can see the pulses now that I've put filters on them, how they have a curved aspect to them. And if you've got sharp eyes, you'll see the sweep up above. Now what I'm going to show you now, we have talked about, and many sharp-eyed viewers have known that this was an important thing about this clip for a long time. Here comes the wave. Look at the dark underlined crater in the center of your screen. Watch how it's displaced, almost like you're looking through water. There goes the wave backwards, forwards, the wave hits the crater, displaces. This wave is displacing, as if you were looking through water, the entire image of the moon. Now, I've never taken the time to animate this. I have talked about it. There it is zoomed in. Now, this is running at 30%. And I'm going to zoom out. There goes the wave to the top, and there's going to be another wave coming in from the bottom. Now I'm going to run this at 30%, so as the wave comes in, you can choose any landmark you want. Here comes the wave from the bottom to the top. Choose any little landmark you can see there and watch it be displaced. Now that round-looking ring crater, forwards, backwards, backwards, and one more time forward, and I'll zoom out. And you can watch it go all the way to the top. Again, this is at 30% with quite a few filters like find edge and some other things, invert. Now that means a lot.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. I trust you can still all hear me and see me. Okay, I can see myself. It means you can see me too. All right, let's carry on here. So this is a huge discovery, people. This is huge. So what is it that we're looking at? The key thing that Crow 777 mentions here is almost like you're looking through water. Pay attention to the words that we sometimes use or other people use. So NASA tells us that space is filled with water. They inadvertently tell us that stars and solar systems are made up from water and silica crystals. And now we find this lunar wave. And first of all, then we see when we look into deep space, it looks like we're looking into water. And now we find these waves that look like they displace images on the moon as if we are looking through water. All of this needs to be examined deeply and contemplated very, very deeply. Something weird is going on here. What is the moon? Why did they fake the moon landings? And were the follow-up moon landings also faked? Is there actually anything up in the sky? Is it just a hologram? How come the moon appeared in the sky after the Arcadians appeared on Earth? After Arcadians, the Arcadians lived on Earth before the moon was in the sky. The Arcadians lived on Earth before Jupiter appeared in the sky, planet Jupiter. So what's going on here? And what is this lunar wave that we're looking at? Are we looking at a hologram? And there's some sort of a holographic projection that is creating this image in the sky that looks very, very real, very 3D. Some of you may have seen these incredibly impressive holographic displays in China, running up to the Olympic Games, or whatever it was, the event recently. I forget what it was now. But these incredible displays up in the sky. I mean, planets, they show whales diving, they show waterfalls, and it looks so real that if you did not know, you would believe that it was truly in the sky. So if, for example, you took those holographic, three-dimensional holographic exhibitions that we just saw recently in China, and you took that back 1,000 years or 500 years or even 200 years, and you show that to people in London or New York and any of the cities, if you suddenly projected that in the sky over New York at night, people would freak out. They would literally freak out. There'd be mass confusion and hysteria. People would not have understood that this was a hologram. So is this just another hologram? And we've been so poisoned and so conditioned to believe that this is a planet. This is what planets look like. And that's how they put it there, to make us believe that this is what planets look like. So they put this moon image in the sky so we can wake up every day and we see the ball hanging in the sky. And that's part of the deception, to make us believe that this is what planets look like. Although this is a moon and not necessarily a planet. You know, while some people argue that it was used to be a planet and it was caught in our, there's all these other weird theories. Okay, remember, this goes a lot further than just what we're talking about here. So this lunar wave is a huge discovery by Crow 777, and he filmed this many, many times. I don't know if his YouTube channel is up. The last time I looked, it was not available. So I'm not sure where to find his videos these days, but I'm very grateful that I downloaded some of them to be able to share this with you. But it's interesting because the moon is not the only planet in the sky that has a wave. And it's fascinating that some of these ancient cultures talk about, let's just go back here, sorry, Jove. Who is the guy that refers to Jove? Yeah, Ovid said the Arcadians possessed their land before the birth of Jove. So the Arcadians were around before Jupiter appeared in the sky. Okay, so the moon appears in the sky, and it has this weird wave going over the moon. And then suddenly Jupiter appears in the sky. And guess what? Jupiter is also another celestial body that has a wave going over it. Before we get to Jupiter, I'm going to come back to this. Everything about the moon is suspicious. Like I said, it suggests to us what other planets look like, right? And I believe that's part of the deception. This is part of the job that NASA was given, to pretend that they landed on the moon so that we believe that the moon is a physical solid object and not just a hologram. This is where I'm going right now. This is where my thoughts are going based on the knowledge and the information and research that is reaching me. But look at this, pay attention. This is what's called a space wave. There are two videos here. Please ignore and excuse the music on this first video. Somebody tried to be very creative. But this is a space wave that they filmed passing over Jupiter. I'm going to show you both videos, right?
Would you wake and see I've been sitting here dying to meet you.
There it goes.
Playing to free you.
This is called a space wave over Jupiter. Look how quickly it covers the entire planet. Look at the angle and the direction it runs in.
Dying to meet you. Playing to free
The angle, it's basically parallel to those two lines in the center of Jupiter, at the equator of Jupiter. All right. right, so that's the one video. And here's another one. Now pay attention at the angle of the wave here. Is it the same angle or is it slightly different? You can see the angle of this wave is very different, a different angle. Just like the lunar wave that Crow 777 showed us, that the waves that cover the moon come from different angles. And here we have two waves that cover Jupiter filmed that also show us they come from different angles. So do you find it, just ignore this image here. Let me just dwell on this. Let me come back to this, not to distract you. Do you find that as intriguing as I do, that both the moon and Jupiter appeared in the sky after the Arcadians existed in Greece? They suddenly appear in the sky and they both have lunar wave and a Jupiter wave when we observe them from Earth. Is this purely just a holographic effect? Some big hologram is projecting up in the sky, and that's what we observe. And everything else that we've been told and shown about Jupiter and the moon is pretty much a lie. Is that what we have to come to terms with? I'm beginning to believe that that's most likely closer to the truth than anything else that NASA tells us. So everything about the moon and the sun in the sky it just starts to become very, very interesting. And everything about the moon is deeply and highly suspicious. First of all, the fact that the sun and the moon are exactly the same size in the sky is simply a statistical improbability. Because in a world of infinite possibilities, the fact that our moon is a perfect sphere or a circle in the sky and a disk in the sky, and the sun is a disk in the sky, and when the two collide or cross each other, they are exactly to the micromillimeter, exactly the same size in the sky. Now, just think about the statistical probability. For those of you that are into science and physics and mathematics and probability will probably understand this a little bit more than those people that don't grasp the statistical probability miracle here. In an infinite universe of an infinite number of stars, planets, solar systems, galaxies, it just so happens that the one moon that we have is a perfect disk in the sky. And when it meets the sun, it covers it exactly, with not a micromillimeter left to be seen when the two are exactly on top of each other. The statistical probability of this happening is simply so huge and impossible that we have to conclude this was done by design. This is not an accident. This must be done by design. What that reason is, why that is, still to me remains a mystery. I haven't figured out, or I haven't got any ideas or theories on that at this stage, I must admit. But I've observed this, I've embraced it, and I'm comfortable with the fact that all of this stuff is probably done by design. So let's carry on. Now we get to the problem of the Van Allen belts. Now, keep in mind, this is still all to do with the moon landings, right? If space is not what we think, and the moon is possibly not what we think, what if the moon is a hologram and Jupiter is just a hologram like the moon, created by who knows what powerful cosmic three-dimensional holographic projection? We don't know what other beings are out there. We know that there are other beings. We keep getting interesting information about all these other beings that are either controlling us or in contact with us or have landed here, have created us, and the Anunnaki and so many other very powerful and advanced beings. We don't know what technology they have. We don't know what kind of con they're pulling, what kind of theater they're creating for us. So we have to just keep our eyes open. So what if the moon is a hologram? What if Jupiter is a hologram? What if all the other planets, the so-called planets, not the stars, what if the planets that we see in the sky, that we can zoom in with powerful telescopes, What if those are just holograms? But we don't know because our telescopes zoom in on a very powerful three-dimensional holographic image. It's like those people in New York or London or any other city. If in 200 years ago they saw those three-dimensional holographic exhibitions we saw in China, they would have believed it's true. Well, we believe that these are real planets in the sky, and our telescopes show us that they're planets in the sky, so we simply believe it. So here we have, this is why they had to fake, so what I was really leading up to with that line of thinking is that because they know that the moon is not real, that the moon is a hologram, they knew that they couldn't land on the moon. They had to fake the moon landing to make us believe that the moon is real. Is that a possibility? Well, it's certainly in my box of possibilities, and I'm contemplating that very, very seriously. So this takes us to, more recent times, to this very young, naive NASA scientist telling us how the Orion rockets are being prepared. This is from about 6 or 7 years ago now, and how they're getting the Orion rockets ready to send them on a deep space mission through the Van Allen belts. As you can see on this picture, I tried to load the video, by the way. I don't know if this video is still available. I've got a suspicion that they took this video off, but I saved it some time ago. I tried to load it to show you, but it's in a format that this cannot play. So I'll explain to you what this guy is describing here. So he's describing the Orion rockets, how they're going to go into space, and how they're going to go through the very dangerous and deadly Van Allen belts. And you can see him drawing that squiggle there. That's the moment that he's talking about the Van Allen belts, and how the first Orion missions are going to be sent without astronauts, without people, highly, highly protected, so that they can see if the instruments are protected against the Van Allen radiation and against the radiation in deep space. Think about what he's saying here. He's telling us that they're not testing and checking when they send this Orion belt rocket into deep space through the Van Allen belts and into deep space towards the moon and beyond the moon, whether it'll withstand the deep space radiation, the Van Allen belt radiation, whether the instruments will survive it, and if the people inside the Orion rocket will survive those radiation levels. This is what he's talking about. So how is it possible that we sent in 1969 through to 1976, was it? I believe the last moon mission, was it 6 moon missions or 7 moon missions? I get confused all the time. I think it was 6. 6 times out and back through the Van Allen radiation belts and to the moon, and whatever radiation there is out deep space closer to the moon, who knows at this stage, because everything is very fuzzy with the information and the lies. So what has happened over the last, since the moon landings and since the fake moon landings became a hot topic? I suspect that this has become a huge problem for NASA itself internally, where many of the scientists, the really bright minds that NASA employs. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying that these scientists are in on this. These are just really smart people that are really good at what they do, that are employed by NASA and other such research institutes, whether it's in pharmaceutics, whether it's electronics, in engineering, technology, energy, electricity, all that. They always employ the best possible minds and the best people. These people don't know that they're working for a disinformation agency. They come, they're very excited. They work for NASA. They're going to be working on deep space and rockets and this and that. So they're very excited and enthused. So they deliver with huge enthusiasm, and they give their best. They give their knowledge and their talents and their skills and their abilities to these corporations that then use that knowledge, and they hide what they need, and they only put out what they want between the lines so they don't give out too much. But what has obviously happened over the last 50 or 60 years, since the fake moon landings began to gain a lot of ground, some of the internal NASA scientists started to ask these same questions. How did we get the guys onto the moon in a little tin can that is infinitely less advanced than the rockets we built today, in little tin cans, it's like a sardine can, literally, to the moon and back, that withstood all the heat, the radiation, the friction, and so forth and so forth. And they survived it to come back to tell the tale. And the answers, unfortunately, from within NASA themselves were probably starting to worry many of these NASA scientists themselves. Because as far as I sense today, the official story that NASA puts out, and this is what I found, there might be contradictory videos here and there, but the research and the information that I have is that NASA's official story about the moon landings and the Apollo missions in the 69 to 76 is that we have lost that technology. Not only have we lost that technology and we're rediscovering the technology, but in addition to that, they have lost all 800 or so, I forget exactly what the number is, but 800 or so of the film reels, the reels of film that have been shot on the moon, on the way to the moon and on the back from the moon, with the images inside the cockpit and of the Earth and of the moon before they get there, and then the landings on the moon. All that footage has been lost, except that which we now see on YouTube and what has been put out. Somehow that remained, but 800 reels of film just mysteriously vanished. They lost that, and they also lost all the technology. So now they're rebuilding the technology and relearning the technology to be able to send people to the moon again. This became a bigger and bigger problem for the NASA scientists. They probably could not digest this. And I believe that this led to the next biggest lie and press release that was released by NASA in February 2019. I believe it was February 2019. I'll share that with you, the date with you. NASA realized that they had to come up with a new lie, a new deception that will forever remove the Van Allen belts problem. And that lie was released, as I mentioned, with this. Sorry, this is what the Van Allen belts look like. This is how they depicted on beautiful images, the inner Van Allen belts and the outer Van Allen belts. Some of them are, many times more powerful than the others and so forth. So just to understand what the Van Allen belts look like, these are the powerful Van Allen belts that some people claim will fry you when you go through them. Others play it down. They tell you that they're not so powerful, not so deadly. The problem is that the inquiry, the growing inquiry from the unhappy NASA scientists led to a decision made by NASA to put out a new false flag, new disinformation that would forever remove the Van Allen belt question and or worry or argument. And that was that this was, as I said, February 2019, 21st February 2019. Staggering discovery reveals that the moon lies inside the Earth's atmosphere. Please pay attention to this, people. This is the lie that NASA had to make, that NASA had to come up with to dispel many of these Van Allen belt problems and so forth. It's just spectacular what they will do to lie. Now, it's now, here we go. Read the second paragraph. Oh, let's read the whole thing. The Earth's atmosphere is much bigger than previously thought, extending far beyond the moon. A team of scientists have revealed the amazing discovery was made thanks to data that was been sitting unexamined for 20 years. And by the way, they blame the Russians for this, okay? They blame the Russians for sitting on this data for 20 years and not sharing it. This is what I find so fascinating. So we now know that the atmosphere surrounding our planet stretches 630,000 kilometers. This is amazing. Exactly. They tell us 630,000 kilometers or 391,000 miles away. And it's 50 times the diameter of the Earth. Thanks to discovery, and now I can't read that because it's covered by my thing at the bottom there. Oops. But they found this in Russia's Space Agency Research Institute that's been sitting there, hidden out of sight for 20 years or more. And Russia did not share this with the rest of the world. So they blamed the Russians for not making this discovery. This is just almost too good to be true. This is like stand-up comedy stuff, people. Best stand-up comedy material you can find. In fact, I've often claimed that if you're looking for stand-up comedy material and you have a scientific mind and you're a comedian or you have a comedic streak, please do this. Use the particle physics, use the whole nuclear physics and particle physics and quantum mechanics knowledge that they put out, and use NASA, use what they put out, use the moon landings and use all this. They write the stand-up comedy one-liners for us. We don't have to make it up. It's unbelievable. And with this, they simply demolished any arguments about the Van Allen belts and how deadly they are, because now we know that the Earth's atmosphere is much, much bigger than we imagined, and that the moon actually sits within the Earth's atmosphere. Isn't that fantastic to know? So now that we know this, and the Van Allen belts have no threat on us going to the moon, the next question then is, where does the atmosphere end? And so when we go into deep space, where does deep space begin? And where does the vacuum of space begin that is outside of our atmosphere? And now suddenly the complication kicks in. And very soon, when the scientists and NASA start to ask these questions that I've just very simply posed here, they're going to have to come up with more lies to cover up this lie. So slowly but surely, or very quickly right now, things are falling apart because the lies are becoming so ridiculous that they very rapidly expose the agenda of hiding what is really going out there. So one of the next big lies that we find is obviously the Mars landing. You know, these are images from the trials, the rehearsals. That's what the word I'm looking for. The various Mars rovers and the rehearsals they were doing with NASA on Devon Island in northern Canada. Practice and rehearse, you know, how the Mars rover would deploy, how it would come out, and how it would move around, and so forth. And they did all this on Devon Island in the Canadian Arctic. And if you look at this and the coloring of it and just the structure of it, it is identical to the images that they keep sending us from the Mars landings, the rover, and all the images that we get from Mars. And I suspect that everything we've ever been shown from Mars is just an exercise that they keep or did and then ended. They did all the videos, they did all the photography, they've got hours and hours and hours of it, they got millions of photographs that they can share. And they wrote that whole narrative for us, just like they wrote the moon landing narrative, they wrote the entire Mars landing narrative of the rover and all that. And they keep feeding us this BS, and we just keep buying it, you know. And this is deeply disturbing. I was so excited when the Mars landing happened, because, you know, in those days I was still naive and I believed all this stuff. I was a lot more naive than I am today. I simply cannot believe that this is happening for various reasons. You know, think about satellite connections. Think about how our satellite connections are affected by the so-called solar mass coronal ejections and solar waves and electromagnetic waves from the sun and so forth, and how it affects and puts out entire cities, the electric grid in an entire city and so forth, and how you make a phone call, a cellular phone call from one city to another, and how you often struggle to just get a signal on a cell phone. And they want to tell us that they're getting beautiful images and drone footage, that they're controlling radio, remote controlling drones flying around Mars. What is it, 60,000, 80,000 miles away, or sorry, 80 million miles away. Mars, I think it's 80 million miles away or something like that. And they're remote controlling little drone helicopters and other craft flying around on Mars. Really? Do people really believe that? Come on, guys. Let's be real here. We have to smell the BS when they present it to us. And it's for this very same reason that I'm doubting the legitimacy of Elon Musk. He may have created a great car and great, technology on Earth. And it's for that reason that he was brought in on the same way, or in the same way that they brought in Stanley Kubrick in 1968 on the set of while he was filming Space Odyssey 2001, and they actually used that same set for Space Odyssey 2001 to shoot the fake moon landings, and that's how they brought Stanley Kubrick in, and that's the same way they brought in Elon Musk to become the new face of NASA and space exploration, because he represents the most advanced technology and engineering on Earth. So everybody will believe Elon Musk when he sends rockets into space. And when his rockets suddenly, as the TV commentators tell us, when you watch the moon land, the rocket launches, when you watch the many rocket launches that they've launched, and you listen to the commentators and they tell us the rocket is about to enter the vacuum of space. And when I hear a commentator say that, I just go, you've got to be kidding me. Where is this boundary where the rocket is about to enter the vacuum of space? Surely, if they're going to try and lie to us and con us, they should train these people better. Because the moment you say something like this, you make anybody with a bit of a physics background sit up and pay attention, because that simply cannot be the case. There cannot be a hard and fast boundary where the vacuum of space begins and sucks like crazy, and below it is this beautiful blue marble called Earth with its lovely atmosphere intact. Oh, but there's a problem. Now suddenly the atmosphere goes 630,000 kilometers, not 100 or 110 kilometers up into the sky, where they tell us the Kármán line is, where commonly and generally the acceptable beginning of space starts, where the atmosphere suddenly ends or becomes too thin for airplanes to fly. It's called the Kármán line. And that's where I suspect they tell us where the rocket is about to enter the vacuum of space. So this is just an ongoing story of weaving a non-stop ongoing lies. NASA is the agency, never a straight answer that they set up for us. And I noticed that we've gone beyond the hour and a half now. I've really enjoyed talking about this. I'm going to carry on just for another 5 minutes or so before we get to the Q&A. Just to remind you that we live in an electromagnetic universe. Even within that statement, it is a subtle deception. I think we have covered this before. So just to remind you that everything in our reality has a certain vibrational frequency attached to it. Whether it's your body, whether it's your heart, whether it's an insect or a butterfly or a football field or a bacteria or protozoa or a virus or a molecule or an atom or an atomic nucleus. Very important. Everything in creation, in our reality, whether it's seen or unseen, has a frequency attached to it. And that frequency that controls its existence, its shape and form, is known as the prime resonance frequency. I suspect this is where Star Trek got its idea of the prime directive. It's a whole nother discussion. But this is the prime resonance frequency that controls everything in our reality. Please keep this in mind. But when they tell us that we live in an electromagnetic universe, even in that little statement, there's a subtle deception, because sound and magnetism are inextricably connected. We know that God said, let there be light. Whether you like to believe it or not, that's up to you. Everything comes out of creation, the consciousness of creation, through vibration and resonance. It is that primordial resonance and vibration and frequency that creates light. So when it says God said, let there be light, it's literally a crash course. Sound creates magnetic fields, and moving magnetic fields create electromagnetic fields or electricity, or the moving electromagnetic fields or magnetic fields create electricity. So I'm getting a bit tired here. My mind is glitching a little bit. And therefore, it's important that we call it the way it is, that we live in a magneto-electric universe, not in an electromagnetic universe. Magnetism comes before electromagnetic fields and light. Sound, magnetism, light. This is really, really important. And it's very important that we come to terms with the fact that every frequency of light, please keep this in mind, because this is not taught. Even in spiritual fields and metaphysical fields, there's so much effort and energy, so much focus put on light. Oh, the light, I'm walking to the light, and so forth. It's very important to walk into the light and to live in the light, but it's important to understand how that light comes to be. That light cannot exist without its very own unique or prime resonance frequency of sound. That every frequency of light has a corresponding frequency of sound, without which that light could not exist and cannot exist. It is the sound frequency or the resonant frequency that creates the vibration that we on earth call sound, that sound frequency creates the light. This is really important. So whenever you see a beautiful rainbow, understand that that rainbow sings. That rainbow, the colors of the rainbow have an incredible frequency of sounds that we cannot hear. And it's those incredible frequencies of sounds and the light, those colors of light that we see that manifest in toroidal fields that have very strong foundations in sacred geometry. And when we break that sacred geometry down and we use the angles of these sacred geometric patterns, and this is the great work of my dear friend Eric Rankin that runs a radio station in Laguna Beach, California. Some of you may have heard me do radio shows with him every time I do a tour of the USA. I'm sure Neil knows him, Eric, up there in Laguna Beach. Do you know Eric there?
Yeah. I connected you on his show a few years ago too. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So Eric, after one of the shows that I did with Eric, he suddenly had a little brainwave, and he started looking at sacred geometric patterns that make up our universe, make up our reality. And he took the angles of triangles, squares, pentagons, hexagons, and so forth. And as he started to add he took the frequencies and he converted it or played the frequency on a keyboard, the corresponding frequency. And as he added the next frequency from the next shape and the next geometric shape, what it does, it forms a beautiful harmonic chord in F sharp major. This is truly spectacular. This is one of the most important discoveries. I did not prepare the slide because I didn't think I'd go there, but I'm going to end on this note today because we'll start here next time on the incredible discovery that the universe sings in F sharp major. Why that key, I don't know, but this is the incredible discovery that Eric Rankin made. When you take the angles of sacred geometry patterns, they give us a chord in F sharp major. So I imagine when we look at rainbows in the sky, somewhere, somehow, because the sacred geometric patterns that come out of that light, it'll be singing in fractals or harmonic variations of F sharp major. And on that note, I'm going to finish off here and go to the Q&A because I've done a lot longer session than normally, the 1.5 hours. So let's see if there are any questions. Q&A. Right. Okay. Hello from London, UK. Hello. Hello, Mac. Oh, hello, Mac. Good to have you with us. Guys, if you want to ask questions, we have another 40 minutes or so.
So since you dropped out, there's two questions that you probably can't see because it resets when you come back in. So I'll read this one for you.
Can you read that?
Yeah. I live in North Vermont, USA on some heavy quartz deposits. Can I make a toroidal stone out of quartz? And what are the ramifications if possible?
Oh, absolutely. If you can take that quartz, you can make, if you know how to do it, that'll be fantastic. Please make a torus out of it if you can, and then share that. And get one of these devices if you can, or anything else that measures electromagnetic fields and magnetism. And see what you get out of it. This is spectacular. If you can do that, it'll be beautiful. I will be putting some of my torus stones, the replicas of the torus stone that crashed the TSA security system in Doha. I'll be putting those on my online web shop very soon. As soon as we sorted out the hiccups with the payment gateway, it seems that we've sorted it out. Some of you may know that I've been promoting the negative ion generator and the enriched oxygen generator, the enriched ozone oxygen generator on my online web shops. And if any of you are sick or want high negative ions in your environment, I highly recommend those two. I don't want to use as a platform to promote the products, but since we're talking about it, they are on my web shops and they are unbelievable products. But the reason I mentioned that because we've been sorting out some problems with the payment gateway, which looks like it's sorted out now. People were blocked from being able to pay for these products. It looks like it's been sorted out now, but I'll be putting these torus stones, these replica torus stones, because I'm never going to sell the original, obviously, that sits safely in the Stone Circle Museum. But I'll be offering these replicas that look identical. And as I mentioned already, they are active. They generate toroidal fields measured with this device. That's mind-blowing. So I'll be making those available very soon. And you'll be able to get those for those that are interested. And we'll probably make replicas of some of the other torus stones that also give us very powerful measurements with this device. So yes, please make that torus stone. Whoever asked that question.
All right, you can open it up now and read those that are in there.
Okay. So there's a very long statement here by Charlie. I don't know if I can read that whole long thing. So if you have a short question, please just ask me a question. The Schumann resonance, is it real? Let's get back to, okay, let's go to Elise M. Thank you for the question, Elise. Wow, my voice is suddenly starting to bail out on me here. I need to go and sit with my enriched oxygen mask for 5 minutes after this. So what about the Schumann resonance? Is that real or made up? No, that's very, very much real. That's a resonance that vibrates from the ground. That seems to be the fundamental frequency that's put out by the earth. That's a spectacular discovery, the Schumann resonance. We're talking about, I think you might be trying to reconcile the frequency, what I said, that the universe sings in F sharp major. You're trying to reconcile that with the Schumann resonance. If so, it's a very interesting question, and we need to look at that and look into it, how the two connect, where do they connect? But what I can tell you is that it's the Schumann resonance that is probably and most likely responsible for the shape of the Stone Circle ruins, because you hopefully you know from my videos and everything on my websites that the stone circles are mere representation of the sound frequencies that come out of the ground. So it's a cymatic shape or a cymatic pattern, right? The shape of the sound frequency at that specific place. But because the Schumann resonance, or the frequency of the earth, travels through rock, through soil, through sand, through water, through trees and plants and different layers, and then when it reaches the surface of the earth, there are angles, there's slopes of mountains, there's stuff on top as well. That all creates diffraction. So when you try and identify the sound frequency coming out of the earth, it's not going to show you a perfect symmetrical shape like we often get on a cyma plate or the metal plate. When you put the sound frequency on a very flat metal plate and you put the sound frequencies through it, you often get beautiful symmetrical patterns that form. That's because there's this perfect flat surface that distributes the sound frequency perfectly equally throughout that metal plate. And because metal conducts sound well, it'll create often a beautifully symmetrical pattern of that sound frequency. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said about the surface of the earth. So if you're going to use the surface of the earth as a cyma plate or a flat surface to identify the shape of the sound, it will come out very distorted, but still the cymatic shape as it comes out of the earth. So it's quite possible that it's the Schumann resonance that is the primordial driving force or the driving frequency that makes up the shape of the stone circles. But because of the land and the soil and the angles and the imperfect surface, we get these distorted shapes. And it's really important. The Schumann resonance was at 7.86 or something like that, if I remember. The Schumann resonance. So it's a very low frequency, very low frequency. That means that the shape of that cymatic pattern will be large, right? And that seems to be consistent with the general and the average size of the stone circle ruins would represent the lower frequencies of the Schumann resonance. That's why they are so large. However, the moment that frequency goes into the walls that are placed on that cymatic pattern that they identified, and they built the walls on top of that cymatic shape and the cymatic pattern, to turn it into an energy generating device to amplify that sound frequency from earth. Those stones on top obviously are much smaller stones. So they create harmonic fractals of those frequencies. And this is why we measure first of all, the sound frequencies. We measure various sound frequencies in octaves and resonances, right, up to the gigahertz. And we measure a collective electromagnetic field that they collectively create. But even that, thinking back about when we did those measurements, the people that did the measurements for me were very confused because they seemed to, I recall very clearly how they were confused about trying to calculate all these things because they were getting confusing measurements in different sort of levels, right? But all amounting to a certain powerful electromagnetic field that had like harmonics at different levels. And this is why it's important to understand how harmonic fractals work and how octaves and harmonics work and how toroidal fractals work. And this is why it's such a beautiful study, because once we comprehend this and once we understand this, it is so easy to comprehend everything and anything. And especially this next subject that we're going to cover next time, which is what I call the particle physics agenda and the quantum mechanics and the quantum zoo. And how little our particle physicists and our quantum engineers, not all of them, I guess, but most of them that go through mainstream education, how little they really comprehend. They have a lot of knowledge, but how little they truly comprehend about the source of all these so-called particles that they think they're studying, and how they really are just studying resonances, so, vibrational frequencies and toroidal fields of certain vibrational resonance. Right, a mouthful there. So let's carry on to the next one. Mac, all you were saying about holograms is explained like a camera obscura. Yes. Yes, I'm not quite sure where you're going with that statement, but what I read between the lines is yes. Do you know of, sorry, this is Mac again. Do you know of Tensor Technology and Slim Sperling? I think his studies and you are parallel. Yes, I'm aware of Slim Sperling. I have his book. I have a number of his rings here. I have a number of his, his Tensor, those twisted wire rings of his. I have those around my house. I have some, those were actually gifted to me by my good friend Sandy Mack over several years, who very generously parted with some of her Slim Sperling rings and so forth, and his book. So yes, I'm aware of Slim Sperling, and he clearly was a very informed guy. I'm not quite sure how his technology has been adopted or taken by others to put to use to our ability, or for our benefit, sorry, to be put to use for our benefit of humanity. And that just reminds me, by the way, what I forgot to tell you earlier about my partner, Martin, that I was showing you when I was showing you right in the beginning, and I was telling you about the discovery of the quasi-crystals. I also mentioned to you that we made some more discoveries with our toruses and so forth. And what Martin did, and I mentioned I wasn't going to show the video because I didn't ask his permission. He took one of these metal, these ones. That's it, exactly one like this. And he took a little light bulb. I should have done it. I'm just too busy to do these experiments, quite frankly. So when people send me experiments like Martin does, I get very excited. Hopefully when we get some funding through the Antiquities Research Institute, when it officially gets launched, it'll open the doors to some funding because we become an official body. We can start doing these experiments on a more formal level in a research lab with some funding. Hopefully that day will come. Anyway, Martin took one of these wire things and let me get a bit further away, and he simply put a light bulb with tiny little LEDs in them. I think they were like 30 tiny little LEDs inside a bigger light bulb. And he attached it to the center of the torus. And he just twisted the light bulb a little bit. It was like he was tuning it. And as he was turning it and tuning it, suddenly at one place, the whole light bulb lights up. Absolutely spectacular. Just proving that there's a very powerful electromagnetic field being generated out of the poles, as I showed you, the electromagnetic field. Let me do it again in case you missed it in the beginning. You can see I'm about 6 or so centimeters away from the pole. Does it do the other side? Yes, it does both sides. Okay, so just so that you see, it's not, I took it out of sight, so it does this side and it does the other side as well. All right, so both sides of this little toroidal field generate electromagnetic fields. And that's what Martin discovered by adding a little light bulb and by just twisting it like he was tuning a radio frequency, right? Trying to find a radio station. Suddenly at one point, the light bulb just lights up. Hopefully next time I can show you that video if Martin is okay with it. Otherwise, you can do the same experiment yourself. And hopefully this gives us an idea that we can get energy and electricity and energy and magnetism out of toroidal fields. We just need to know how to amplify it. Okay, let me put that down and carry on. So Elise, solfeggio frequencies, something good to use or not? And now I'm questioning everything scientific. That's from Elise. Elise, yes, do question everything scientific. However, I can say just carry on doing your own research. I don't know how to answer your question. You will automatically know when you're exposed to a certain frequency. Your body tells you. Your body will tell you if it feels good or if it doesn't feel good. And I've been experimenting with tuning forks that we just inherited, and and that we bought and so forth. And I've been experimenting with all kinds of tuning forks, and I'm finding phenomenal results. Like, for example, some of the tuning forks, I've got a few, like one or two, or a few little fatty lumps that over years I've grown, right? Little things that grow. I've had one cut out many years ago, and I guess I might have to have one or two cut out again. But it's just a fatty lump that forms. And I found that when I use these frequencies and these tuning forks, certain of these tuning forks, and I rub it over some of these little lumps under my skin, it dissolves them and they go away. Interesting. So I've done that now over the last 2 years or so, and I keep doing it. Every time one of them gets irritating, I just rub some of these vibrating, these what do you call them? These vibrating prongs and tuning forks, and I must be getting tired. I can't think of the words. And they help to dissolve these little fatty lumps under my skin. It's ridiculous. So solfeggio frequencies, I guess one could explain or describe them as harmonic resonant frequencies of sacred geometry. And I guess, take it from there. Do with that information what you think is necessary. Are hag stones the same as Taurus stones? Hag stones, good question. I can't say I'm familiar with hag stones. Not sure what a hag stone is. And I'm sorry if I'm showing my ignorance, but I've not heard. I might recognize it when I see it, but I can't see what a hag stone is. I can't recognize it. Oh, interesting. From Frank DeZergo, New York City. Beethoven wrote 3 major symphonies in F sharp major. Interesting. Look, that F sharp major thing is a huge discovery. I don't think people realize how important that is. We're going to come back and have many, many major discussions about that, and why, the significance of that. We need to get to the bottom of that, because if all the frequencies in sacred geometric patterns amount to F sharp major, that is a huge, huge, huge breakthrough discovery. I can't stress how important that is. How we handle that is blows my mind. And, I wish we had millions of dollars to set up a research lab. But when we launch our first One Small Town, we will launch a research lab that will be able to do this research. So maybe you'll understand why the importance of the One Small Town is a priority on my list, or the launch of the first One Small Town is a priority on my list. All right, my voice is going very, very quickly now. So I was thinking that NASA has mentioned, or the hag stones have mentioned it from time to time. Okay, I'm not familiar with that. By now, you know that the rock that NASA brought, moon rock, and they donated it to the Dutch government as a present. The Dutch did research on it, and they proved that it's not a rock. It's just petrified wood. That's a huge, huge embarrassment for NASA. They don't like to talk about that. So Charlie, thanks for the question. The F sharp prime frequency is the reference of 432. Is it the reference for 432 hertz? Very good question. Very, very, very good question. No, it's not. No. 432 hertz, I believe, is the key of A in musical. I speak under correction now. I think 432 is the key of A. F sharp major is not 432. So these are all things that we need to start to reconcile. How do they fit together? Because these are all relative fractals and harmonics of each other. And we need to start to identify and recognize the significance of this. Because right now we have a lot of information. We have a lot of little balls of knowledge, but we haven't figured out yet how the importance, the interconnectedness of it. We know they're connected, but we don't know the significance and the role of each one of these. The role of F sharp major in the creation of the universe, or the song or the frequency of the universe. The importance of 432 hertz, and so forth. And this is just huge work that needs to be done. We have a lot of information, we have some knowledge, we have a lot of knowledge in some instances, but we have not enough wisdom to be able to put all of this together to make us infinitely wise. But I guess we need to meditate on this and bring all this knowledge in. I do believe, however, that our DNA is encoded with all the information that we need to process, all of this. So I believe if we do go into deep meditation and we start bringing this information in and we start to reactivate our DNA to be able to tap into higher levels of consciousness, the higher frequencies, more of the conscious frequencies of consciousness around the biofield or the morphogenetic field that manifests this reality around us. The more we activate our DNA, the more we can actively connect to this field around us, which is filled with all these frequencies of all this knowledge, because all of it is ultimately just knowledge. So the more we can activate our DNA, the more we can connect and tap into this knowledge and know all this stuff instantaneously. So just keep that in mind as well. So it's so important that we get into the metaphysical absorption of knowledge and information, where the answers and the knowledge simply come to you instantaneously, and you don't know how you know it, but you just do. And this is why we need to meditate more. And I speak about myself. I do not meditate enough. And I'm often accused by my wife, Emma Jane, that I don't meditate enough. I must meditate more, which I promise I will do. Sorry for waffling a little bit, but I'm getting tired here. It's been a long 2 weeks. So let's carry on. Charlie, sorry about the long question. Just saying, I have working prototypes of non-metal pyramid generator with central toroidal coil setup that is generation electricity and sets off the field detector from a meter away. Even the non-metal pipes set it off. Water affects the output also. This is fantastic, Charlie. Do me a favor. Please send me an email with this information. So if you want to take this further, because if you want to experiment with this further, maybe I can put you in touch with some people that might want to get involved with you and do these experiments further. However, I do believe that once we set up our first One Small Town, and again, I'm repeating myself, that we will have very advanced research lab that will be able to do all this kind of research. Again, keep in mind that we have the technology, we have the electricity that will be going into these first small towns, that through our brilliant inventors, we have secured the exclusive use of these energy 0 point, if you want to call it that, or free energy generating devices, if you want to call it that. Basically generators that once they start, they keep pushing out electricity. Call it what you want. We have this technology available. We no longer have to think about it or dream about it. These will never be made public or sold. They'll only be put into place into One Small Town, into communities that will collectively own these generators to generate power for those communities. So this is one of the benefits, that we bring very advanced technology together with the Ubuntu movement, and we help the One Small Town get off the ground. But I'll be doing a One Small Town Q&A and a One Small Town workshop. As soon as we have the signed letters from this first municipality in South Africa, this coming week, I expect to get them on Tuesday. I'll then be doing an online workshop regarding the One Small Town, where we've come from, where we are, and where we're now going to be focusing all our energy to make this first South African One Small Town the greatest success ever imaginable, so that all those other small towns around the world can follow suit very easily. Let's carry on. How much time have we got left here? 12 minutes. Okay, so again, another question from Mag. Hagstones are found on beaches with holes. Oh, yes. Okay, then I do know what they are. They have a lot of myths and legends about them. Yes. I'm not sure about hagstones. I actually collected a bunch of them just recently when I was down in Jeffreys Bay, beautiful Jeffreys Bay in South Africa. Emma and I picked up many of these stones, believe it or not. And we were actually wondering what they were. So now I know what they are. Thanks very much for letting me know. But I have done no studies with them, and I don't know if they generate any kind of energies. I think we actually brought one back. I think Emma Jane brought one back with her. So I need to test it with this amazing device. This is one of the greatest toys and blessings that has come into my life. I must tell you, it's fantastic. Right, Elise M, how do we find your products like the ozone machines? Go to my website, michaeltellinger.com, go to the shop, and you'll find all of the products there. My books and the ozone machines, the negative ion generators, and so forth. And I'll also be loading on those shops the Torah stones and other healing technologies and ointments and treatments and things that I find that I've come across the travels that I've done and met amazing people, incredible inventors, designers, scientists, and so forth. I want to share the benefits that I've been able to share, that I've been able to accumulate, and the knowledge I was able to accumulate. I want to share that with the people around the world with these amazing products that I've had the benefit of discovering and finding through the thousands of incredible people that I've been very blessed to meet in my travels. So please go to my website, go to the shop from time to time and see what new products have been uploaded, because I have a whole long range of products that I intend to put there. Now, again, I hate to sound like I'm promoting my web shop. No, I'm just promoting a platform that will be filled with incredible medicines and healing devices and technologies that many, many people can benefit from, right? I'll give you one example. There's I've suffered from fever blisters all my life, and it's always a bloody pain in the ass. The moment summer comes and I go into the sun for the first time, I get a fever blister. And I can remember exactly when I was about 14, 15, when first I got my fever blister and the reasons I got it, which I'm not going to go into. And since then, how every time I hit the sun, it sparks a fever blister. First time I got in summer. And I've struggled with ointments and antiviral creams and all that. Nothing ever works until quite recently in South Africa, I discovered this ointment that is sold to treat skin cancer and skin blemishes and sort of dark patches and skin cancer and that kind of thing. And I started to use it on my fever blisters. And literally, it's like a miraculous cure. Fever blister is gone in 3 days, like 2 to 3 days, it's literally gone. It's just a miracle. So I want to share that with people that have fever blisters, because it is the best cure for fever blisters that I have ever found from my personal experience. So these are the kind of things that I'll be putting out on my shop, right? Just so that you know where I'm going with this. Plus the Torah stones, obviously. And I know so many people have been asking for the Torah stones. Okay, let's carry on with some more questions here. I'm waffling too much. Just to let you know, this is from Dorothy. Thank you, Dorothy. And just to let you know that ancient Mexican shamanic tradition of Nahualismo knows something like the invisible prison of the moon. Wow. That's very interesting. The invisible prison of the moon, which has always something to do with reflections. In addition, the meaning of the name Mexico is place of gold navel of the moon. Yes, I remember reading that many, many years ago, and I completely forgot about that. You know how we get information that's very important to us and we keep it there, and then suddenly it goes into file 13 and we forget about it. We shouldn't. Yeah, that's a very important question. Just think about that. Think about the fact that our DNA is this incredible computer that is capable of holding infinite amount of information and knowledge. That's our DNA. That's connected to our bodies, our cells. We know that water can hold knowledge and memory. Crystals are many of our cells, much of our cells and DNA is it's actually crystalline. So between the crystalline nature of our bodies and the infinite memory of the water of our bodies and our brains, which is filled with water, and the so-called neurons, and which is a whole another debate, we should be able to keep information and knowledge forever and not forget. How is it that we forget? Why is it that we forget something? It just doesn't make any sense. Once we experience something, or we see something, or we say something, or we hear something, we should remember that forever. It should never, ever leave us. We should never forget that. And yet we do. That means that somebody has messed with our brain and our network in our DNA, in our bodies, to make us forget, to make us age, to make us get sick, to make us go through all these things that we go through as human beings. Manipulated. Our DNA has been manipulated over millennia. And it seems that right now, with this whole COVID BS, our DNA is being manipulated again for a whole nother agenda that is suddenly becoming a very, very disturbing reality. How advanced the mRNA technology, together with the graphene oxide technology, has been injected into us, into many people, unfortunately, and many of them unwittingly and against their will. And that's the great sadness here, how powerful that genetic technology and that silicon, that graphene-based technology actually is. It's staggering. So while we may have been manipulated thousands of years ago to be slaves, it seems to be happening to us right now in our own time and right in front of our own eyes. So thank you for that memory of Mexico and the place of gold, place of God, navel of the moon. Yeah. Place of the navel of the moon. So thank you. And then Stephanie says, you talked about the beginning of the Bible and the creation with sound. Yet I've heard that the biblical narrative has been quite manipulated. How do you reconcile this? Yes, absolutely, Stephanie. The biblical narrative has indeed been manipulated. And they obviously the Bible we have is a creation of the Roman Empire, of Constantine. Right? That's pretty much the Bible that they put together at the Council of Nicaea. They took all the books together, all the apocryphal books, and they decided which is going to be in the Bible or not. I recommend you read Slave Species of God, my first book from 2006. Slave Species of God has a lot of this. And this is where I draw the distinction between God with a big G and the gods with a small g. This is really, really important. So what's been written into the great knowledge of the universe and the higher levels of consciousness and the knowledge of, the deeper knowledge that is actually in the biblical, in the scriptures, has been contaminated with a soap opera that weaves its way through it, that confuses us, unfortunately. And the whole thing of the Elohim and the multiple gods and the sons of the gods and the Anunnaki and the Anak and the giants, and how we confuse the God with a big G, the creator of the universe and all things in it, or the universal infinite consciousness of creation, or the God with a big G, whatever you want to call it, and the advanced beings of lower consciousness with higher knowledge and technological knowledge, but of lower consciousness, that cause a lot of havoc. And those have been written into the Bible. And unfortunately, those lines get crossed all the time. And I find it quite spectacular how many of the very knowledgeable people, when they do refer to the Bible and some of the things, how they often cross the line without realizing it, where they referring to something and they're actually referring to the gods with a small g. And this is why the original book that I wrote, Slave Species of God, the God was spelled with a small g, because we were not necessarily the creation of God, the great creator of the universe, or the big G, but we were cloned by advanced beings, genetically cloned. So we are a cloned species. And so everything points towards that. We're a cloned species, genetically manipulated and cloned, where our DNA has been restricted and our capacity has been restricted by beings of lower consciousness, but knowing advanced technology. And that's why I called it Slave Species of God, the gods with a small g, not the great creator of the universe, because we are inevitably connected to the great creation through us being in existence. So we are inevitably connected to the great creation, but not necessarily created by that same great creation. Wow, I am getting tired. I'm stumbling on my words here. So we're very close to, Charlie is asking, what is the email? Charlie, my email address is on all my websites, but for saving you some time, you can send the email to michaeljtellinger@gmail.com. Okay, michaeljtellinger@gmail.com. And finally, final question from Joe Messier. Do these 0-point energy generators put out an energy signature? I have heard that. I'm not sure which 0-point energy generators you're talking about. I guess you're talking about the generators that we're going to be using in our One Small Towns for our generators for our towns. These are proper generators. They put out an energy signature and they generate electricity. They're full-blown electricity generators that are spectacular discoveries and spectacular inventions and creations by very beautiful, smart people. So I guess as my voice is running out, I'm going to say thanks very much for joining me. I look forward to our next discussion. We'll pick up where we picked off with the incredible cosmic F-sharp major key that the universe sings in. We'll pick up with that and go through that as we get into the quantum mechanics and particle physics agenda, which remains one of my favorite subjects. And the reason I say this, let me explain to you why I'm so passionate about that. Because once we grasp the simplicity of quantum mechanics, once we grasp the simplicity of what particles or the make-believe particles really are, and how simply they come into existence and how they connect to each other, once we grasp that through our understanding of toroidal fields and the manifestation of matter through toroidal fields, sound, resonance, and frequency, it is so easy to explain everything. And I mean everything in our creation, in our existence, whether we see it or don't see it, the seen and the unseen. That's why I'm so passionate about it. And I'd like more and more people to know it, to embrace it, to feel it, to totally resonate with that knowledge so that it gets so easy to explain everything and anything in our reality. So on that note, thanks so much. I look forward to our next gathering. Spread the word about One Small Town as well. We're entering a very, very exciting period in our human history. Until next time, bye for now.